Hey everybody, this is Gene Jensen with BassResource.com, and today I've got a bunch of cool people online. I'm gonna kind of try to rotate people through, like I always say, and I always forget, but I'm gonna try to do it again. And we're gonna talk about the main topic is one that I'm very afraid of doing because it has a lot to do with personal preference and things like that. But we're gonna talk about rods and reels, and what lures go with what rods. So. And the reason I say I'm afraid of this topic is because it is I tend to think a little bit different than what the industry or what companies would put on the rod. You know, what goes on what. For instance, everybody says a great frog rod is a 7 to 7.5 foot heavy action rod with 60-pound braid. And I tend to like a 6.6 to 6.8 rod, a heavy rod that with 60-pound braid. So it's all personal preference. But we're going to try to basically fix some of the confusion that especially the newer anglers get when they look at a rod and say, oh, what am I supposed to use on this one? And so we're going to go through that and talk about it. Let me see if I can get started. How am I going to get started? Let's see. Let's start off with reels. I get a question a lot about gear ratio. What gear ratio is good for what? Well, this is a really quick answer. For crankbaits, you can either use a 5-3 to 1. I tried a 4-1 to 1 once, but I wore myself out trying to crank a crankbait. It's just you got to turn that rod so many times, or that reel so many times to get that bait back to you. I was just tired. And when I had to try to catch up with a bass that was chasing me or coming towards the boat, I couldn't because I couldn't turn the handle fast enough. So I like a 5-3 to 1 for deep cranking, and then a 7 to 1 for everything else. 7-1 to 1, 7-3 to 1, 7 whatever, because it's easier for you and your body to slow down than it is for you to speed way up. So there's a lot of people that would disagree with me, but like I said, this is my personal preference. And if I could have all 7 to 1 gear ratio reels, I would go with it because, like I said, it's just it's easier to slow down. And if you've got to catch up to a bass that's swimming at the boat, it's easy to do that. So that's my personal preference. It's not okay. What reel is perfect for a Carolina rig, and what reel is perfect for a jig, and it's just pick a reel that's comfortable for you, pick a gear ratio that's comfortable for you, and how you fish, and go with it. The biggest advantage to having a fast gear ratio is you can bring that bait back to you really quick to make another cast, so you get more casts out during the day. That's the biggest advantage to having one, and that's why I use one with my pitching and flipping and Texas rigs and Carolina rigs and everything that I fish on the bottom. I'm going to have 7 to 1. And even my square bills, I want a 7 to 1 because I can easily slow down if I need to, and just get to the point where I can just barely feel that vibration, and I'm not going to wear myself out. So that's my take on reels. Before I move on, any questions from anybody?
Yeah, why are spinning rods called fairy wands?
I will answer that. I pick on my buddy Mike Buca. Everybody knows him as Triton Mike. And I've known him since early 2001, and I pick on him because he's the one that taught me how to drop shot, and it was with this really, 4.5, 5.5 pound test fluorocarbon line and this real whippy rod. So basically, those of us who think we're manly because we use bait casters are going to call spinning rods something girly, and so I called them fairy wands and pixie hair. Is what I was fishing with. And so, hold on, just kidding. Braden, I'm going to turn you down just for a minute. You got background noise. Oh, he's out. But anyway, so that's the fairy wand and pixie hair is just because, we like to pick on, on people who use them. But I use them. I love them. I only use them when I have to, though.
Well, I have a 5'6", whatever, 5'6" spinning rod I bought for like $12 at Walmart. So do I need to upgrade, or should I, should I go with something else?
You know what? We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight.
I want to make it clear.
So by the end of it, we'll hopefully answer the question for you. So But let's start with the rods. I'm going to start with the fairy wands. I'm going to start with the spinning reels and spinning rods. What a spinning rod is ideal for is, one, it is because the guides, and do I have one here? I do. Because the guides are at the bottom of the rod, they tend to, it is a better fighting rod. So when you're fishing really light line, it puts there's a lot less stress on that line. And let me tell you why. A bait caster, when you pull on, ouch, that hook is sharp. My kids have been using this, you can tell. My hook is all the way up to the top of the rod. When you're using a bait caster and the guides are on top of the rod and you pull, what happens is that rod, as it gets stressed, that rod tends to twist around. That rod tip wants to twist to the lowest position, and that creates a problem when you're fighting fish. And it also puts stress on a stiff rod, as a matter of fact. So, but with a spinning rod, that tip is already at the bottom, and it bends naturally. So you get the full backbone of that rod fighting that fish, and it doesn't twist out, and it doesn't cause a whole lot of stress on your rod. So that's one of the reasons why a spinning rod is really good, and you're using a light line. The other reason is that the line comes off of the spool freely, so you're able to fish light lures and light rigs on it. That's why it's easier to cast a weightless fluke or a weightless trick worm or a light crankbait and stuff like that on a spinning reel, because that line comes right off freely. And so, there's advantages to it. The disadvantages to it is that there aren't many spinning rods that have a lot, or at least bass fishing spinning rods that have a lot of backbone. And so flipping and pitching and things like that, you don't have the power to be able to turn that bass and turn him out of the brush. Plus, they're typically not very accurate. You're trying to sometimes get a lure when you're flipping and pitching into a hole this big in the grass or in the brush, and a spinning rod is very difficult, even with a lot of practice, to get it in a spot like that. Might be able to hit a spot like that, but some of the best casters in the world, you will still have trouble getting in a small spot, and it's just the nature of it. I used to be able to think I was awesome because I could make an overhand cast in between a dock and a boat and let it come right on down, but that's a whole different ballgame, making a long straight cast and things like that. But when you're trying to hit pinpoint positions or pinpoint spots, it tends to be pretty difficult.
I think that I use them both, but I use them for very specific applications. I fish a lot of docks. You can't do that with a bait caster successfully.
Right.
But I find, especially when I tournament fish, I'll fish 8 hours a day, and I get less fatigued with a bait caster than I do a spinning reel. For some reason, I can put myself in a better position with a bait caster than I can with a spinning reel, especially when I'm doing it for 7-8 hours.
And Tom, that's not the first. You're not the first person I've ever heard say that. My arm gets tired. I wish I could design a rod that has a little drop-down handle behind the spinning reel, because I'll actually lose feeling in the ends of my fingertips because of the position my hand's in while I'm holding that rod. And so yeah, you get tired more. But they're excellent for skipping docks. I have this awesome video. Everybody says it's an awesome video, but anyway, I have this video of me skipping docks with a bait caster. I made that video because people want to know how to skip a dock with a bait caster. Do I skip docks with a bait caster? No. I get a spinning rod, a medium action spinning rod with braided line, because if the bass takes me around the dock post or something like that, it doesn't fray. And I put a leader on it, and I'm skipping docks, with a trick worm or a fluke or a Cinco or something. Most people know I hate fishing a Cinco. But anyway, and I'm skipping docks with a spinning rod because that line comes off freely. You don't have all the problems with the backlashes and things like that, and you're able to keep that bait in the water longer because you're not messing with backlashes. So there are tons and tons of advantages to fishing one. So what lures would you use for a spinning rod? Well, you have most of the spinning rods that people use for bass fishing are unless they love to fish ultralights and light action rods, or medium lights for but medium lights, mediums, and sometimes a medium heavy. Medium heavy, and the same goes with bait casters. A medium heavy bait caster, I would fish, light jigs and Texas rigs and things like that on. But you got the choice you have to make depends on the rod action and the hook that you're using. I'll get into that in a minute. I don't have any notes down, so I've got all this stuff in my head, and I'm trying to keep it organized. But so when you're fishing a drop shot per se, okay, and you got a drop shot with let me pull my spinning rod out again. Okay, you've got a drop shot with a drop shot hook. All right, keep this from falling down. All right, there's your drop shot hook. Nice, and let me get my camera to focus on the hook. Nice and skinny and sharp hook, small little hook and things like that. Okay, what are your options? You can fish it on any rod you want to, but what's going to happen? If I fish it on a medium heavy bait casting rod and I set that hook like I would on a jig, that hook's going to bend out. It has a very, very good possibility of just totally straightening out. So you want to match your rod to the type of hook that's on your bait. Crankbaits, the same thing, have little bitty light hooks. So if you're fishing a big heavy rod or a medium heavy rod, or so on and so forth, is that rod going to pull it out? Is the weight of that line strong enough for that rod to break? I shouldn't have said that because it'll confuse you. We'll get to that in a minute too. But so your option on a drop shot, I've got a drop shot hook, so I'm going to fish this on a medium action rod or a medium light action rod. Okay, but what if I want to fish a drop shot with a offset worm hook? So what do I have to accomplish to get a good hook set? An offset worm hook's going to have that hook buried inside that worm. So I'm going to need to have more power to be able to punch that hook through that worm, get that worm out of the way, and get that hook into the fish. And typically, if you're not fishing a very, very light action or light worm hook, it's going to take some power to get that heavier hook in the fish. So what are you going to fish with it? What action and power rod are you going to fish it on? A medium heavy, maybe a medium heavy bait caster, or a medium extra fast spinning rod. So always take that into consideration. Your likelihood of straightening out a rod if you're using mono or copolymer goes way down. But if you're fishing braid, I can straighten out a drop shot hook with braid on a medium light action rod if I set the hook hard enough, because that braid has no give, no stretch. It's not forgiving at all. And so you're going to straighten it. I've done it 2 or 3 times on some really light rigs, straightening that hook out. So when you're thinking about matching a lure to the rod, consider your hooks and what type of baits you're fishing. Okay, let's get into crankbaits real quick. A very, very bad lesson learned for me. I decided I was fishing. Where was I? Wheeler? Yeah, I was on Wheeler Lake. I spent one day on Wheeler, or a day and a half on Wheeler Lake before I came back from Alabama. And I went up to this rocky point, and I was throwing crankbaits. I said, well, I kind of want to throw a deeper diving crankbait because I wasn't hitting the rocks like I wanted to. So I took the crankbait rod, which I was using, which was this Okuma. This is their new square bill crankbait jerkbait rod. Kind of a flimsy little rod, perfect for square bills. And I threw a 5-inch D on there, and I cast it out, hit a rock, paused it, and felt the fish strike. I set the hook really hard, and that fish came straight out of the water and spit the bait right back out at me. And I mean, it was a 4.5 pounder. If all day, it was at least a 4.5 pounder, and I was so mad, mainly because I had pulled up in between 2 tournament anglers that were on both sides of me, and I was kind of showing them up by catching that big fish, and they got to watch that thing, spit my lure out right back at me. And so I began to try to figure out what I was doing wrong, and I realized that it was a crankbait, and yes, this is a crankbait rod, but it did not have enough power, didn't have enough backbone to set the hook on that big crankbait. And so I should have been using a medium. This is a medium action rod. I should have been using a medium heavy action rod with a more backbone to set that hook. And so from now on, from that point on, I have not thrown a 5XD or a 6XD on anything other than a medium heavy rod, because I don't want to lose that fishing, you know. And so, you know, are you going to have enough power in that rod to set that hook? Is that hook too big for that rod? Same thing with line. You know, you see all these, you see the, you know, duckets don't have them, but most rods will tell you what line poundage is good for that rod. Let's throw braided line out the door, because that's a whole different ballgame, and none of them talk about braided line. But you know, it's the monofilament and the copolymer and the fluorocarbon. You know, if you get a light line and put it on a medium heavy rod, it's going to break that line a lot of times on the hook set. You know, I lost a bunch of fish one day fishing a jig because I thought I'd grabbed the reel that had 20-pound line on it, and I was setting the hook like I had 20-pound line on it, but I had 12-pound line on it. And I broke off three fish before I realized, oh, dummy, you grabbed the wrong reel, you know. And that's before I started putting stickers on the bottom of my reels that said what pound test I put on them, because all my reels look the same and I fish the same color line, the same type of line. So let's talk about any questions about spinning rods before I do anything else? Doug, do you have anything? You're always full of words, man.
No. Well, yeah, I've got something. You know, I was asking about like the 5'6". You know, what's that good for? Is that just for bluegill, or you know, can I actually use that for right now to fish? Or am I going to be disappointed?
Now, what is it? What type of rod is it?
It's a medium action Shakespeare rod. It's a Firebird. It was something I picked up cheaply at Walmart a few years ago.
So it's a fiberglass rod.
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably, being that it's fiberglass has a lot more stretch than carbon fiber, or a lot more bend. You probably don't have enough power to get any big hooks or anything bigger than a really light wire hook into the fish. So a short rod is great because it's accurate. You know, the shorter the rod, the more accurate it is. Typically, you know, it's still who's holding the rod has a lot to do with it. But you know, for short people, you know, and for most people, a 6'6", 6 foot to 6'6" rod is a great rod if you got a pinpoint cast, you know, under docks or around things. But if I were you, I would look for a rod that you can afford that is a carbon rod, or has, you know, a graphite rod or whatever, you know, a composite rod, basically what they call them. So
yeah, this local place that I go has some Daiwa for like $20, and he was he said that was what their sale was right now. So I might look at getting that. Is there a difference between spinning and a bait casting? Like, I've got a spinning reel, I just can't afford a bait casting reel. I've got a spinning reel. So
the difference between the two is that little trigger that's underneath the reel seat, and it tends to, you know, your spinning rod, the reel, you know, the reel mounts down at the bottom of the hand, or the bottom of the rod, and so it and the bait caster has and I'm trying to break them on the same ceiling, has this trigger right here, so you can't. It's very uncomfortable to mount a spinning rod on it. Plus, the guides are bigger and they're made for spinning. So yeah, if you got a spinning rod, get a spinning reel, get a spinning rod. So.
No, I actually have a question about your spinning reels. When do you back reel?
I never do.
You just let the drag do its job.
I buy spinning reels with really good drag. Back in the day when the drags really were horrible, is when you'd see a lot of the old users. My father-in-law does it too. You know, back reeling, because they had horrible drags on their reels. Yeah. And if you remember last week or the week before, Doug, I was talking about that one fish that I broke off on a pond at Fort Gordon when I was first starting to get serious about bass fishing, and it was on a cheap Shimano that I bought from Walmart, and I heard the drag pulling, and all of a sudden the drag caught. And it was a big fish, and it snapped it right off. And when I got home, I told my wife, I said, I will never buy another cheap reel with a bad drag.
Yeah, I have a good drag, so I don't have to worry about it. But I've just seen videos of people, probably older professional guys, do it.
Yeah, and I guess if I was fishing 2-pound test line, I might worry about the drag having an issue with it. But I don't ever fish 2-pound test or 4. You know, I fish 4 on an ultralight, and it has good drag, and I've never had a problem with it. So. You know.
What's the purpose of back reeling?
Back reeling is you do that in instead of using your drag.
Okay.
You know, every spinning reel has this little switch on it.
Yeah, it can go the other way.
Yeah, it goes the other way. That's all it is. You're fighting a fish, and you back reel with that fish and let it have some line.
Yeah.
And so I've never seen an advantage to it. I just set my drag loose, you know, a little bit looser than what most people would, and not worry about it. So let the drag do what it was designed to do, because all these drags these days are amazing compared to what they were 20 years ago. So I know Tom agrees with me.
A proper drag is your best friend.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
It's hard to catch anything bigger than a 5-pounder if you don't have your drag properly adjusted.
Yep.
And there's times I'm really big on braid, but if I'm using a speed worm, a finesse worm, if I'm drop shotting, then I'm using fluorocarbon. I'm using 12-pound fluorocarbon, or I'm using 8-pound fluorocarbon if I'm drop shotting. So my drag, it's got to be set absolutely perfectly. And when I clean my reels, and I do that a lot, I always make sure that my drag discs are nice and clean, and there's no gunk or dirt in there, so they function when you need them.
Yeah, exactly. I made the mistake one time of when I put my reel back together, I just kind of flipped over something in the drag system the wrong direction, and it wore that drag disc out. You know, and it was my crank. It wasn't a big deal because it was my cranking reel, and so I needed that give anyway. But you know, I finally realized what was going on and took it apart and had to order a new one. But you know, the drags are important. Now, you brought up a good point though, setting your drag, and I get that question quite a bit. Is how do you set up your drag? Everybody's different, but by a rule of thumb, I guess, it's 50% of your breaking strength of your line, is what I've heard. Now, some people do 60, some people do 40, and I do it by feel. You know,
I do it by feel, yeah.
Yeah, I always use 12 or 15-pound test line anyway, unless I'm cranking, and then I got the drag set loose anyway. But you know, you grab a hold of your line and you pull it out. If you can pull it out fairly easily, or you know, with quite a bit of tension, but you can still pull it out, then you're fine. You know, especially if you're using 12 or 15-pound test. But if you're using ultralight stuff, loosen it up. A lot of people get really scientific about it and put a scale on there, and you know, and pull their line out with a scale to see how much tension it takes to pull that drag out. You know, and so, but if I'm fishing like heavy cover, I'll crank that drag down quite a bit to where it's really hard to pull it out, but yet it still pulls out. So,
well, with my spinning setup, I usually set it like pretty precisely. I don't always turn it all the way up, because I'm usually using lighter line. But on my baitcaster setup, I always put it like full drag, because I'm using heavier line. I'm not really worried about it snapping. Is that wrong, putting it all the way up? And then if it's like a heavy fish, I kind of feel like it, and I can just turn it down in like mid-fight. Is that kind of wrong to do on a baitcaster?
No, not really. But how quick can you turn it down? I mean,
it's the lose one, so it kind of takes one turn.
I know a lot of guys. Mike Buca, the Triton Mike guy I was talking about, he what we call wrenches them down all the way.
That's what I do.
And because he'll actually free spool it. If he's fighting a fish, he'll hear him clicking, and you hear a lot of people. What's that? Brent Ayler. I hear Brent Ayler doing a lot.
No, I do it all the time too.
Yeah,
clicking
it and let the fish have some line and use that as their drag. That's fine. It's risky to me, but you know. But if I'm fishing heavy cover, I don't see any problem with doing it, especially 60-pound braid. What's the worst thing you can do is break your rod on a hook set. So you know, it's just personal preference. I don't do it. I don't crank it down all the way.
If it's spinning compared to baitcaster.
Yeah. So. Let's see. Let's get into bait casters, and I hope I answer everybody's special question about spinning rods. And it's going to kind of be the same about bait casters. You know, you look at the hook, look at what you got to do for the hook set and stuff like that, and you also got to look at what you do with casting. But let me pull out a bait caster real quick. Let's grab the ghost. All right. This is the new Ducket Ghost. This is actually a heavy action ghost, and I have a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight on there, a flipping hook, and stuff like that. So what I'm thinking about, you know, I'm starting from the top end or the top end of the bait casters, is what do I have to accomplish with it? What does a rod do? casts the line or casts the lure, and it sets the hook, and it retrieves the lure, or it creates action on that lure. So with a this is basically a punching rig. It's a light punching rig. I only have a half-ounce weight on it, like I said. But so I've got to make short casts. I don't need a lot of flex in that rod because I'm not going to make a long cast on this bait. The flex in your rod and the amount of flex that your rod has is what propels your lure out. And so I'm not going to have to cast this a long ways, but I need to have enough backbone to get that nice big heavy trocar hook in there. Doug, don't laugh. I still got a trocar. I got to use them all up before I get
You don't need to put much pressure for those trocars.
No, but anyway, so I got these. I've got to be able to penetrate the fish with these with a heavy hook, and I've got to be able to turn him and get him out of the cover before he wraps my copolymer line up around whatever brush he's in. So I've got to have a nice heavy rod that I can muscle these fish in with. On the flip side, you've got your cranking rods. Okay, let me put this one up, and I'll pull out the cranking rod. Which one? Let's get the medium heavy one. Okay, the cranking rod. All right, the fish is going to, and this goes with any open hook bait. Okay, open hook treble bait or even spinner baits. I use a little bit stiffer rod with spinner baits just because the hooks are a little bit bigger. But you've got, what do you have to do with this? You've got to cast it a long ways to get it the deepest it will go. It's a deep diving crankbait. Even with a square bill, you want to cast that sucker as far as you can, or if you're fishing cover, be accurate with it. But so you need a rod that has some flex in it. How much flex does this rod have in it? I mean, a ton of it. So I've got enough flex in this rod to throw the bait, but it's a medium heavy because I've got to have enough backbone in the rod to be able to set these heavy hooks.
But it's a fast action tip, most likely, right?
Yeah, and it's a fast. I think it's probably a moderate to a moderate fast. It's got a little bit not quite as stiff of that, or it's a moderate rod, or it's got a parabolic bend, so it's about a moderate fast. It's not quite as stiff yet. So, but it's got a lot of flex in it. But it's got enough power because it is a 7.5 foot rod, and it's got a lot of backbone. It's got enough power to set the hook on that bait. So. And on the flip side of that is a lighter crankbait. This is a 5XD on a medium cranking rod, but this rod has enough power to set the hooks on it. So you got to have flex to throw some baits, and you don't need any flex to cast other baits depending on your cast. Okay, so let's go through the baits that I would use on a medium heavy action cranking rod. Okay, that's what this is. A Duckett Micro Magic 7.5 foot medium heavy action cranking rod. Okay, I would use it for deep diving crankbaits because I've got to make a very, very long cast, and I want to get them down as deep as I can and keep them down there as long as I can. I would and it has enough backbone to set the hook. I would use it on a lot of spinning spinner baits if I wasn't trying to pinpoint cast because it's a long rod. I would use it on if I'm just covering area and covering water as much as I can and trying to make long casts. I would use it for spinner baits. Another good. I'm gonna back up a little bit. Another good thing that a good flexible rod has for crankbaits is a lot of times you have to wait a second or two, or you have to have a little bit of give in the rod and the line and everything else to get a good hook set, or get a chance for that bait to get all the way inside the fish's mouth. What happens with a crankbait when a fish grabs it sometimes? It's got 2 treble hooks on it. It'll get part of the way in the fish's mouth, and the other treble hook will stop it from going in that fish's mouth. And if you set that hook too fast, that fish won't get a chance to take a second bite or get a good grip on that bait, and you're pulling the bait out of its mouth. And so, like this spring when they were hitting that rattle trap, man, they were choking, and I had to set the hook as fast as I could before they got it down their gut. You know, and those are the days you dream of, is the ones where they're choking your crankbait. But that's another bait that I would throw in that medium heavy, is a rattle trap, because it will sling that sucker as far as it can go, and it's, you know, you can feel the vibration, and you got all, you know, there's so many different advantages to fishing treble hook baits on a medium action crankbait rod or cranking rod, or what they call a medium or medium heavy. I'm sorry, or what they call a medium heavy moderate, or a one that has a parabolic bend. All the same thing. Let's see. Let's go to a medium heavy cranking rod. Okay, this is the Duckett Micro Magic. It's a 7'3" medium heavy powered cranking rod. I still have the baits from my MTB Slam on there, but anyway, this is, it's got a little bit more, a little less bend in it than your crankbait rod, and so you're able to. The reason people say it's the best all-around rod is because it will cover the whole spectrum of bottom bouncing baits, Carolina rigs, Texas rigs, you know, stuff like that. But if you're using a light wire hook, it's going to bend that hook out. If you're using a heavy like a super line hook, you better be using super line on it, because it's going to be tough to get a hook set in the toughest part of the bass's mouth with a medium heavy rod. If you don't have, you know, and I don't use braid on most of my rods anyway, but it's just going to be hard to set the hook. Let me think. I would use this for, it's my Carolina rig rod, it's my Texas rig rod, it's my what else do I throw on it? That's I'm kind of narrow-minded when it comes to bottom bouncing baits. Lighter, not jigs less than 3/8 of an ounce, or 3/8 of an ounce and less. If I'm or ½ ounce and less. If I'm throwing anything over ½ ounce, I'm going to use a heavy action rod, just because the cast feels a little bit better for me. What else would I throw on this? Small crank or swim baits is another thing I would throw on it.
What would you throw? What would you normally throw, like a square bill with?
A square bill?
A small one that, you know, your typical everyday KVD square bill.
Yeah, like your 1.5 and
yeah, the one like the 1.5. Yeah.
I would throw it on a medium action cranking rod. This is my KVD square bill rod. It's a let's see, it's a 7-foot medium action cranking rod, Micro Magic. I think the numbers on it say DFMM70MCC. That's what I throw in. And then this new Okuma one that I tested this year, that's going to be my second square bill rod for those really, really small ones. And it's hung up. I'm not going to be able to get it out. But anyway, it's the one that Scott Martin designed. I was, you know, it's just, that was a phenomenal. It's going to be actually my jerkbait rod early spring, because it feels good with those jerkbaits, and real good with those really, really light, small body, like the 1.0s and the little Lucky Crafts that I throw. Yeah. Just easier to handle them. So. And
you normally can tell if you try to throw like a 1.5 on a medium heavy, and when you get it behind you and you really need to snap it, because these things work best when you can get them out there as far as you can. If you don't feel it's like fly fishing. If you don't feel the parabolic bend,
yeah,
down,
the back bend, yep.
Back bend. If you don't feel that back bend, then you know you got way too much rod for what you're doing.
Very, very good point. Yeah, you know, when you and to help explain a little bit more, when you make that back cast, you want to feel that rod load up.
That's the word, loading up. Yeah.
If you are having trouble understanding what we're saying, go back and watch the video I did on the float and fly, where we're using these 10-foot rods with 10-foot leaders, throwing these little light flies with them, and we actually had to lay the line in the water behind the boat to get it to load up to be able to cast these things. So we'd lay that 10-foot leader way out in the water behind us, get the water to help load up that rod so it would be able to make a really good cast out in front of us. Same sort of deal. And like Tom said, if you're making that cast and on that back cast you don't feel any flex on that rod, your rod's too stiff for your lure. Or if you find yourself throwing what I call water darts, where you're making a cast and it hits the water right in front of you, You know, 9 times out of 10,
That's the same thing. And and it's just the opposite is true when you're fishing. When we flip and pitch a lot of mats here because of the heat and all the grass. And if you're using a half or a 3/4 ounce weight, and when you go to retrieve it, your rod is really bending, you might as well just give it up because you're not going to catch a fish with it.
Right.
That's when you need a medium heavy. You don't want that bend to take place, because if you do get a bass, you'll never get them out of the thick weeds.
Yeah, you're right.
You really want to use something stiff.
Yep. Yeah. So, and that comes with experience. That comes with getting out on the water and doing it. But yeah, if the weight of your lure is bending your rod, you got issues.
Yeah.
You got some major issues. And you can have a little bit of bend, especially if you're using like a 1/2 ounce weight on your drop shot, because you're dropping in 50 foot of water. That's a different story because you're fishing it on the bottom and stuff like that. But if you're actually making casts with it, you want to go with something lighter. And if it's not bending in the back, you want to go with something. You want to change your rod. If it's if it's bending in the front, so you just got to kind of play with it and understand what the feel is. And the reason Tom says that, especially with flipping grass and stuff like that, if you've got too much bend in that rod, there is no way you're getting a fish out of that grass that's in Florida.
Well, you just drag them deeper in the grass, first of all. If you get a bend in your rod and let's say you do have a fish on, and the rod begins to bend right when the fish hammers your bait, when you go to pull the fish out, all you're going to do is drag that bass through deeper grass. You need a 7-foot rod, a good heavy rod, so when you do launch that bass, he's going to more or less come straight up. Yeah.
Man, I would love to get down there in January when they're spawning. I'm so jealous. But any questions so far about picking the right lure for you? And you notice, I want you to notice though, I am not talking about I'm not looking for a rod where I can read what lures work on that rod. Okay.
What do you generally do for a lipless?
For a lipless crankbait, and I read this in an article years and years ago. My ideal lipless crankbait rod is a medium extra fast or a medium fast action rod, because it's got enough flex in it to have a little give to the hook set, and it's got enough flex in it to be able to cast that sucker a mile, but it's got enough backbone to rip it through grass. Anybody ever watch me in my videos fish a rattle trap? I am not still with that thing. I am as aggressive as I can get, banging it off of stuff, ripping it out of grass and stuff like that. I had a kid make fun of me for using 15-pound line on it. He's like, well, why don't you use 6-pound? I'm like, because I'd break it. I'd break it in just how I fish it. And so, it's 15-pound test and I'm ripping it through. But it just makes the perfect lipless crankbait all the way up to the 1/2 ounce. Lipless crank. You get into those heavier ones, those Spros that are 3/4 ounce. I'm gonna up it to medium heavy.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Because the same thing, you just feel it after a while. You feel it. Oh man, this has just got way too much flex in this rod, and I'm not getting what I need out of it. So, and I typically don't. I've got a bunch of them, and I used to fish them a lot, but I don't fish them much anymore just because I have a lot of confidence in my red eye shads and the couple 2 or 3. Rattle traps that work really good for me. So, but yeah, anybody want to know? My favorite rod is a medium extra fast rod, and everybody always says, what's the best rod, or what's the best all-around rod? If I only could buy one rod, it would be a medium extra fast. A lot of people say a medium heavy because a lot of people fish bottom baits and things like that, and I do too. But a medium extra fast rod will cover a lot of different things. I love to walk a spook. I love to walk a fluke. I love to cast all kinds of stuff like that, and it's perfect for walking a spook. It's very difficult to cast a light weightless fluke on it, but I've learned how to do it. I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who's just learning a bait caster. What else? I throw spinner baits on it. It's a really good spinnerbait rod. What else? A light or 1/4 ounce shaky heads. I throw 1/4 ounce shaky heads.
That's it.
Hold on, and I'm trying to think of what else I throw on them. All kinds. I mean, most of the things I fish the most on my home lake, I throw. So a medium extra fast rod is a good all-around rod. 12, 15-pound test line. You know, you can throw light jigs on it. You can throw light Texas rigs on it. I wouldn't go anything more than 3/8 of an ounce. 3/8 of an ounce is almost too heavy for it. And so that reminds me of another thing I just want to cover just because it popped into my head. A lot of new guys will say, well, you know, and I've actually gotten this. Like, there's a guy that will actually take his weight and his hook and his lure and weigh it on a scale to see whether it's a half an ounce or see whether what it weighs so it matches that rod and stuff like that. Just go with the weight of the lead or your sinker, you know, and don't worry about your hook. Don't worry about the weight of your soft plastic or anything else. Okay. You're throwing a half-ounce bait because it has a half-ounce sinker. You're throwing a half-ounce jig because the head is a half-ounce lead on that head. And don't worry about everything else. Don't get it more confusing than what it really is. So, all right. Any questions?
What is the lightest you'll use for a Carolina? As far as well, it depends on your action of your rod too, because if you're using medium heavy or medium, you can get away with some things. But what's the lightest you go?
I go medium heavy because I don't. You remember? I don't know if I remember talking to you about it last week or what. I don't really change the weight of my Carolina rig much.
Okay.
Those little those true tungsten Carolina rig weights they don't make anymore. I bought a ton of half-ounce, and that's all I own. And so, but if I'm going to fish something light for a Carolina rig, I'm going to go to a spinning rod and fish a 16-ounce Mojo. So, you know, I keep it simple. I'm not going to go, okay, I'm fishing a 1/4 ounce Carolina rig. No, I'm not going to do that. I want to get the bait on the bottom or the sinker on the bottom and let the bait do what it's going to do. So half-ounce, 3/4 ounce. That's about it. So with a medium heavy rod. And it also, you know, you want to make the longest cast you can with a Carolina rig most of the time anyway. So, and that brings up a point. One of the first fish I ever caught on a Carolina rig, I was using 12 or 15-pound mono, and I caught it on the very end of the long cast. And I remember how far I had to set the hook. I reeled into that fish, and by the time I felt the fish on the hook, the rod was completely on the other side of me. It was almost a 180-degree hook set because of that much stretch on that line, on that monofilament. So if you ever, you know, even with copolymer, or even sometimes braid, if you ever get a bit on the sink, on the very initial part of your cast, you better set that hook all the way behind you until you feel that fish coming, because it's tough. It's a pretty cool experience though. But
well, I have a question about line now that you mentioned that. One of the reasons I'm to the point now, and a lot of my buddies are, that we're almost, other than when we need to use fluorocarbon for more finesse work, especially drop shotting, a lot of us have gone over almost exclusively to braid, and then you just put on like a 3-foot leader with a uni knot or something. But the thing with the braid, though, it seems, is you really get a sense of, you can feel the bite. And there are days when the fish will just about rip the rod and reel out of your hand, but then there's more days when you can't tell that they've even bitten. And that braid just does a better job of, it seems to me, transmitting that feel.
you know,
Do you want that to be true or not necessarily?
You know, knowing the conditions that you guys fish a lot of times, I'd be fishing braid all day long too, because of the things you've got to, the cover that you guys got to pull stuff out of. Me personally, 90% of my rods have copolymer on, because I'm fishing a lot of clear, open water with not a whole lot of grass most of the year. But when I get into that thick cover, into that grass, the water's still really clear. So in my head, I don't want the fish to see that line, so I'm going to fish fluorocarbon. I've tried braid on the Carolina rig and didn't really like it, mainly because that braid I'd tie the braid to the swivel, and I'd have that have the hook, the weight on there, and actually that weight would spin and tie knots in that braid a lot easier than it would on fluorocarbon or copoly. So I stopped doing that. But oh gosh. You know, to me, it's just personal preference. What do you feel most comfortable with? and especially with the conditions that you're fishing. If I was fishing down in South Florida or down in Florida with all that beautiful grass and the different types of grass and things like that, and knowing that I'm mainly fishing for reaction strikes because that bait's falling into that grass or stuff like that, I'd be throwing braid because you don't have to worry about what the fish sees. They're going to react to that fish, that bait, falling in front of you. So
our water here, it's either tannic or it's dirty. Mostly tannic.
Yeah.
And a little stain. So there's a lot of times you can just put green braid directly onto your crankbait. It wouldn't. It could care less.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, it's and what's funny though, as good as copolymer is, I don't see a lot of companies pushing it anymore. As like they were. They all want you to buy the $20 spool of fluorocarbon or the $25 spool of braid and stuff like that. But man, I've hung a 5-pounder on a stump at Lake Fork. I mean, hung it up out of the air, and it took me 5 minutes to get to it. And I pulled that fish, and that fish never broke off, and it was only 15-pound line.
Wow.
And it was sitting there hanging on that stump. And that was the deciding factor for me. I said, you know what? I'm going to keep using copolymer because, one, it's inexpensive. Izerline, the reason I use it is because they don't have a marketing or a advertising budget. They keep their prices down by not spending any money on advertising. And so I'm able to buy a quarter-pound spool for about $13 to $16. And that quarter-pound spool lasts me 2 years. And now I'm buying 1-pound spool, and I'm still only putting, I've had one for 3.5 years, I think, a 1-pound spool of 15-pound test, and I'm spooling up stuff up all the time. But
and that's copolymer? Is that
that's copolymer. It's the Izerline Triple
What
X.
brand are you using?
It's called Izerline. I think they're out of California, and it's a Triple X super copolymer. I'm not sponsored by them. I know I guess it's the assistant manager or whatever. I don't know what she calls herself. But anyway, I've met her a few times, but it's just a good line, and I use it.
How does it spelled?
Izorline, all one word.
Okay.
Now I have a question. There's those fluorocarbons that are really expensive, and they're just leader lines.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between the leader lines and the actual 100% fluorocarbon that Trilene or Seagar has? What's the difference between the super expensive leader line and just regular fluorocarbon?
Tom, do you know that? Because I have no clue. That's
Yeah. That's a great story.
Is that marketing?
The best thing you can do is I use tons and tons of leader line because I fish braid. So sometimes my fluorocarbon leaders they could be 6 feet. I could care less. I do a uni to uni knot. I put plyo bond, which is like snot almost, and I put it on my knot and I smooth my knot out. It's an old fly fishing trick.
Yeah, I never heard about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't, it works perfectly.
Yeah.
So the difference is they claim that the leader line is less abrasive. In 25 years, I've never fished that type of line. What I do is I go to Bass Pro, I buy their 15 or 20-pound fluorocarbon line, and I use that for my leader, and it works absolutely perfectly fine.
Yeah, I see no need for that expensive stuff. I see no need for that expensive stuff. It's just I see it as marketing.
The only one I will not use is they have a blue label. What am I trying to say? They one of the original fluorocarbon companies.
Red Label or something like that.
I know which one you're talking about. I can't remember. It's not Triple Fish.
Is it
No, not Triple Fish. It's they have a blue-black label.
Yeah, it's the old saltwater stuff you're right. It's one of the original.
Yeah, and their fluorocarbon's horrible. But I just use Bass Pros.
That makes sense. If the difference between really expensive fluorocarbon and the run-of-the-mill Bass Pro Shop stuff, you see the difference in casting if you're using a full spool of fluorocarbon. You really don't see the difference in knot tying. Knot tying, if it breaks, it's your fault. You don't see the difference when you're using it as a leader. So you make a good point. If you're going to use a fluorocarbon leader, you can get by with buying that cheaper stuff, that inexpensive. You know, the Cigar Red Label and stuff like that. So that makes sense.
My buddies, nobody in the club uses. Nobody in the club, either my age or much younger or even older than I am, no one puts fluorocarbon on their reels anymore because there's the thing about fluorocarbon. There's a question about its longevity because it seems to be the UV effect. It's exposed to too much daylight at times and it seems to get brittle. So when I tie a leader, that leader will never last more than 1 day ever.
Yeah.
Fluorocarbon or mono?
Fluorocarbon.
Fluorocarbon.
I thought that was
I'll
mono.
rip it off and retie it.
I thought it was mono that gets broken down, not fluorocarbon.
Well, I think it's our opinion. It's just our opinion in the club that it's not a. There's guys in the club who still use Berkeley Trilene, and they absolutely positively love it because it lasts forever.
Yeah.
Fluorocarbon to me and my friends, we all just are of the opinion that it has a longevity issue when it's on your reel.
Yeah.
And I can't really put my finger on anything about it.
Tom, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go try some of that. When your next spool of fluorocarbon that you get, buy some of that KVD line and lure stuff, and spray it on your fluorocarbon. The reason I say that is when they were advertising with Bass Resource, I put them to the test, and I took some 20-pound fluorocarbon and I sprayed it. I treated it with it. It takes 24 hours to treat it, and I treated it with it and put it on the spool just to see how long until it started to cloud up and look gunky and just start feeling stiff and nasty. 2.5 years I had it on my jig rod, and I probably caught 2,000, 2,500 bass on that jig rod that were between 4 and 8 pounds.
What is it? Some kind of line conditioner?
Yeah, it's a conditioner, but it's and I talked to and I hope he's not watching, the nerd that designed it, that designed it. He's a great guy, but he's really kind of nerdy, kind of geeky. But anyway, he's a chemist, and it bonds in a molecular way. It kind of fills in the cracks and grooves and makes it kind of smooth, and it doesn't break it down like the Real Magic the Real Magic does. Real Magic will actually break down your line to make it feel.
Yeah, you don't spray that on your line. That's the worst.
But this bonds molecularly, and it actually has a UV protectant in it too. And it's kind of a cool little deal. And it's water soluble. It's got a water base to it, so it penetrates through your whole spool.
What's it called again? KVD what?
KVD line and lure, or it's just called line and lure. Some of the bottles have KVDs. Some companies refuse to carry anything that says KVD on it, and I can't remember which company that is. And so he made some that just say line and lure, and some say KVD line and lure.
So you just spray that on the spool, like the big spool, not your reel?
Yep, I treat the spool once. When I first get it, I'll treat the spool.
Sinks into that too?
Yep. Yeah, and if you don't want to treat the spool, then what you do is you spray it in a rag and run your line through it as you're putting it through. And it doesn't hurt to do that do both of those.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever tested it? Because on the bottle it shows, I don't have the bottle with me, but it shows that it increased your distance as well. But I've never tested it. Have you tested it?
If it does, it may be just a few feet. And I'm not big into making the longest cast I can unless I'm throwing crankbaits. I think an accurate cast is 10 times more important than a long cast. So
I was thinking as far as lipless crankbaits and other stuff, getting it out there.
Yeah, but I really haven't put it to the test. I haven't noticed. It's just, the thing is for me, even with my copolymer, I spray it on my copolymer. I spray it on some people say it keeps the color from your braid from wearing off too fast, but I don't buy into that.
It won't wear off the color of your braid?
That's what they're saying. That it keeps.
Oh no! I had the opposite experience.
Okay,
it melted it off.
So I never bought into that. So.
Oh no! I had that, and then I had a mono leader, and I sprayed my mono leader. It was pretty good amount of mono. I didn't really even touch the braid. It didn't get that far, but it started leaking and started dyeing my actual mono green from Power Pro.
Huh.
So it actually it bleached it basically.
I believe it.
Does KVD claim that you can use this line and lure conditioner on anything?
It just says mono and fluoro on it. It doesn't say anything about braid.
Yeah, I read something somewhere where somebody was putting it on their braid and it worked really
I have
good.
the bottle with me somewhere. I just can't find it.
Why does it say lure? You spray it on your lure too?
I don't know.
It says I'm looking it up on the computer. It says line and lure conditioner. Huh.
Yeah. I don't know why it would condition your lure, but but it's it has the same consistency as water. It's not oily at all. And when you spray it on your you spray it on your spool, it penetrates pretty much through the whole spool pretty quickly. Except for the big, the 1 pound spools, I treat them once a year. After I've taken some off, I'll spray it again. But it's got a nice little UV protectant and everything else, and it makes your fluorocarbon last a lot longer.
Try it.
Give it a shot. Take a look at it, especially if you're using it for that. You're buying that cheaper Bass Pro Shop stuff for your leaders.
That's why I was asking about the mono versus fluoro, because I've always had good fluorocarbon with the KVD. It lasts me forever.
Yep. Yeah, and I still can't believe that jig. I mean, that spool of jig line lasted 2 years. Or 2.5 years. It was amazing.
It was Shakespeare was the name of the fluorocarbon. That's just.
Oh.
Remember that? The blue label.
Yeah. After about a year, you felt like if you dropped it, the line would shatter like glass.
Oh, it was absolutely horrible. You could break a knot just staring at it.
Yeah. Now that brings up a good point. Since we're talking about fluorocarbon, make sure that I'm kind of one of the, I don't know if I'm an oddball or what. I tie a improved clinch knot with my fluorocarbon, which is dangerous because if you burn the line as you're pulling it tight, you're going to lose that fish. But I lube it really good and I cinch it down really careful and I push the turns down really good and cinch it and do it really careful. But Tom, what's the best knot for fluorocarbon? Line to bait. Oh,
definitely. You can do the Albright knot or a modified Albright knot is good, but for me,
not for main line to leader, but a line to bait.
You need to. Oh, you mean braided line or like leader to line?
Yeah, no, leader to bait. Leader to bait. What do you use?
Oh, I'll probably do a polymer knot.
Okay.
But with that said, I snell my hooks a lot.
Okay.
Now, the reason for snelling your hook is that when you snell a hook, when you set the hook, people are convinced that it penetrates better than doing a conventional knot.
Here, I'll show you. Okay, this one is snell. Let me get my hand behind it so it'll zoom in. Oh, let me flip it over so you can see. This one is snelled, okay? Yeah. And what happens when that fish bites, and especially when you're flipping heavy baits and stuff like that, that fish bites, and see what that hook did? When I pulled it tight, that hook actually turns up like this. It goes from being straight to turns up, and then the business end of that hook is coming out of that fish at an odd angle. So it's going to penetrate. Your hookups are a lot better with a snelled hook.
Yeah, we all do. We all snell our hooks.
Yeah, and it's all about how you do it. You got to make sure that when you run that line, when you're tying that knot, and you run the line down in that hook. Come on, zoom in, focus in on me, buddy. Make sure you run it down through the top of the, through the same side of the hook that the tip is on. You do it the other way, and you set the hook. That hook's going to do this. You're going to get out of the way, and you're going to miss every fish. Especially with, you're right, with fluorocarbon, it does not. You don't have a tendency to burn your knot or burn your line when you tighten your knot down. So.
You can do a polymer knot with a drop shot, but then you got to pass the leader line back through. You know what I'm talking about. You have to pass it back through to get it to pop back up.
Yeah. So, but the biggest thing is lubricate your knots and be really careful when you're pulling them tight. And if you feel that line catching it all while you're pulling tight, cut off and retie. It's when you feel it, you hear it still stuttering as you're pulling your knot tight. Even if you pull your line tight fast, you'll feel it stuttering. You just burned your knot and burned your line, and it'll break. I lost a crankbait.
With fluorocarbon, have you ever done the San Diego jam knot? because it's a lot like the clench knot as far
San Diego jam knot. Would you
with
say?
with the coils around it. It looks like, a lot like the clench.
Yeah, it's like
San Diego jam knot. Did you say?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually use that from time to time. Yeah.
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 well, me being a scout leader and teaching knots for so many years, I believe that a knot needs to be easy to tie, and when I'm looking at a San Diego jam knot, it just makes me go cross-eyed. I'm like,
Well, you're working backwards.
Around.
yeah.
They spin that bait around.
I want to be able to spin that bait, tie the knot through, and be done and be gone. Go back to fishing.
I use It's so quick.
Yep. Yeah. Any questions, you guys? Because I've covered what I need to cover. But I'm afraid that I left too many things out.
Oh, I'll give you a little hint on a new bait caster.
Yeah.
I just recently purchased the new Daiwa Tatula.
Mm-hmm.
Atula.
Yeah.
And it has a very unique way how the line is fed off the reel.
Yeah.
It looks like it actually opens up. It doesn't go through a little hole like a conventional bait caster.
Mm-hmm.
It opens up like a wing, and the line is much more free coming off the spool. I mean, you literally can improve your casting distance probably
I bet.
20%.
Yeah, just less friction coming off the spool. That's cool.
Oh, it's crazy for throwing crankbaits.
Now I have a. Sorry, go ahead.
The Tatula reel, is it the Type R or is it just the regular one?
No, I tested them. I have a good friend who owns Bitters Baits and Tackles. So John, we tried them both out, and the $200 one is the better one. It really is. Huh?
A lot of people didn't like the regular one. I forgot, it was like ballistic something, but the Type R one was a lot better.
Oh yeah, I mean I only have one of them. It is expensive, but it'll last forever, and it has but I use it for a very specific purpose. When I'm throwing a crankbait, I want to be as far away from the boat as possible. So I'll cast at a Texas mile, and it really makes a difference.
That T-wing system was smart. Whoever invented that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool.
I have a chance to buy a Abu Garcia Black Max and rod. That's the Daiwa rod I was telling you about for like under $50. Is that a good investment? Or
that is a good starter reel, bait caster.
I used to have that one. The Black Max, I used to have that one. It was like a $70 reel. Yeah.
Yeah, I just gave away 2 Black Maxes, and I absolutely love them. They're good reels. They're really good starter reels. They got a lot more. If you're used to using a $150, $200 reel, you can feel the difference. But it's not so much difference that it's not a good reel. So.
Yeah, I'd read a lot of reviews on the Black Max, and some are hit or miss. Some are like they junk up after like 3 or 4 months or something.
Well, if you're going to fish a full tournament circuit with it, yeah, they're going to. The plastic parts are going to.
I'm not that level. I'm not Fluke Master level yet. What are you talking about?
I don't fish tournaments. What are you talking about? But yeah, if you're just a weekend angler or fishing when you can, I don't see any reason why not to. Why do you need a $500 $200 to $500 reel?
They're a good reel.
I stick with $120 to $150 reels just because I know that if I hear something about to go wrong, I can take it apart and fix it. And so I don't believe in a $200 reel, but that's just me.
No, I use they cost about $100 to $115. Shimano Sidicas, am I saying it right?
Yeah, yep.
I probably have 6 of them, and the reason I keep using them the same bait caster is that I know how to clean it. I know how to adjust the drag. I know it so well that when I change from a Senko to a crankbait to a Carolina rig, I can adjust it within seconds, and I know exactly what it's going to do. And I'm to the point now where I never backlash because I know how what to expect from the reel. This brand new Tatula, I backlash all the time with it because I still haven't learned how slow I can go or how hard I can jerk it when I throw it out there. But for bait casters, it helps me. I don't know about other people, but it helps me to stay with the same brand. So when I pick that up, I know exactly where that bait's going.
Now I watched your video on how to use a bait caster, and that's my biggest fear is backlash and birds nesting. But I watched you. Do you feather the line with your
Yeah.
thumb?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to teach your thumb how to do it. Now, what you do, and it's one of the things I did a very poor job on that video is if you find yourself making a lot of backlashes, just tighten down a little bit on that knob on the right side of your reel. Just tighten down on it just a little bit, not even just a touch, until you get to the point where you're not making backlash. Teach yourself how to make that cast, and then as you get better and better, loosen off of it, loosen off of it.
Well, I'm gonna ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to send a personal letter to my wife and say that I should be able to purchase this because I just purchased a kayak, and so if I can get this Abu Garcia Daiwa rod and reel for $50, if she hears it from you, she'll believe you, not me.
I'll give you a little secret on how to when you're learning to throw a bait caster.
Yeah.
It's going to save you hours and hours. Let's say you're going to learn to throw a bait caster, and you're going to start throwing it. Fluke Master, I don't know. Let's say he's going to learn to throw it 50 feet or 70 feet to begin with. Pull out 50 or 70 feet of your line on your reel.
I love this one.
Put a piece of tape. Put a piece of tape right there and stop it from unloading any line beyond that point. So when you do bird nest, it'll be a very, very simple, quick bird nest.
Yeah.
And then as you get better, you can remove that tape, and you'll be fine. That way you don't spend a fortune on line, and you don't ruin the line by sticking pens and pencils in there and ripping the line to shreds to begin with, which I've done myself. But that little trick with the tape works.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I want to do in a video is show how to get backlashes out. I always forget about how to fix problems, how to get things out of the trees, and how to all the problems we have. But I always don't even think about making a video. One of these days I'm going to go and make a video about all that. But yeah, that's a really good point. Go, let out a cast plus a little bit more and tape it down. So the reason I say plus a little bit more, so when you are getting a backlash, you are, and then you can get it out and it doesn't mess up all your line. I love that, and I've never done it, but I've heard it a dozen times, and that's such a good idea.
We've had a couple young people come into the club that were just strictly spin fishermen, and they wanted to learn how to bait cast, and that's a little trick we told them. So
yeah. Cool.
But don't get me wrong, I still use my spin caster. There are times when you're finesse fishing, it's just a better way to go.
Okay. Yeah, I hate them. My kids I have half a dozen of them sitting out on the back porch so the kids can take them out to the river and go fishing. And there's so many, because they're my kids and because they beat the snot out of everything they got their hand on, they come back and every night I'm spent, putting new line on them and stuff like that. And that's the only reason why I don't like them. They're great, but they just have their issues. And if you don't know how to deal with those issues, they can be pretty frustrating.
The biggest problem with spinning reels is you don't load the line on properly.
Yep, and that's why I made that video.
The problem with spinning reels, and there's a very easy trick to it. You look and see if your line is being discharged counterclockwise on your spinning reel.
Mm-hmm.
When you put that line on, you don't line your spool thing vertically.
Right.
That's not how you do it. You lay it on one side. You lay it on the side when it comes off that spool counterclockwise. You want it to come off the spool the same direction that it loads onto the reel.
Yeah. So counterclockwise. Yeah.
You've got a good video on that.
If the reel is loading, putting line on counterclockwise, then you want to take the line off the spool counterclockwise, and that'll end what am I trying to say? The line being all spun up.
I saw your video on that you put up on how to spool that, but a friend of mine had one of those line boxes. We went fishing last weekend, and he has one of those line boxes where you clip it through and you crank it off. Have you ever seen those? They're like little plastic boxes.
Yeah, I have a couple of them in my book.
Does that make a difference, or?
Yeah, it does. If for some reason you don't want to take it out and lay it down, another thing that I've heard is to have it coming off the bottom of the spool. And I haven't tried that out, and I don't believe it, but I've heard a couple of pros say if you're going to do it, take it off the bottom of the spool. Or the best thing to do though is just take it out and lay it down to where it's coming counterclockwise off of that spool, and put it on your spinning reel. Because
if you don't do it that way, what you're doing is actually you're loading the line and you're twisting it thousands of times as you load the line.
Yep. And then you just added to the problems, and that's the biggest thing, you know. And to me, you're gonna get line twist. It's limiting. It's extending the time before you have so many problems. You have to get it out. So
exactly.
And how do you get line twist out? You know, Chris, because you like to hang out on the bank. Well, you got the kayak now, but anyway, bank fishermen. And one of the coolest things I ever figured out was how to get line twist out when you're sitting on the bank. You know, and what I did was I cut my bait off, and I just put a sinker, a bell sinker, on the end of the line. And I don't live in Nebraska, so I've got trees, and I chunked that bait over top of the tree, and I let it fall back down. And trying to figure out who's got background noise. There we go. But anyway, I cast it out and I just let it dangle, and the line twist comes off. And then I hold my hand on the line, and I let the line come through my fingers, and I'm pulling it off, and that line's twisting out at the same time. You know, that's a bank fishing trick. Now, if you're in a boat, you just let the line out behind the boat and hit the idle, and don't have anything on the end of your line at all, and let it out the back of the boat and let it idle through. Or let it idle for about 60 seconds to a minute, and let that line twist out, and then put it back on your spool. I did that once and had a boat run over my line, so I got a little bit of line in this prop. So that's two ways of doing it. What's the other way? Aaron Martins did a video, and if you guys can find it on YouTube somewhere, it's a really good deal. Is where he takes on a drop shot, he leaves the weight on the drop shot and the hook, but takes the bait off, makes a long cast, and then just holds a lot of pressure on that line as he's reeling it in, and points the rod directly at the bait, and as he's reeling it in, and then lifts it, and a lot of that spin will come off as it comes back in, and then lifts it up and lets the rest of the line twist come off, and he's able to fish for another 2 or 3 or 4 hours before he has to do it again. Nice quick way. Put the bait back on, go back to fishing. You know, and I tried that, and it works. It works really good. So. That one I didn't know until recently.
Now, if you've got a line like, say, I've got that spinning rod that I talked about, and it says it's 10 pound is the maximum. If does it hurt to put 12 pound or anything like on there? Will that damage it, or will that cause any problems to it, or should I, not put 12 pound on there? You know what I'm saying?
Ask your question again. I'm sorry. I was getting
sorry.
Somebody else. Somebody was spamming my channel.
If you like my spinning rod has a 10 pound limit.
Right.
Someone give me like a huge spool of 12 pound line. If I put that 12 pound line on there, is it going to cause problems?
No. I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't think so at all. No. Braden, I've got you muted because you've got a whole lot of background noise. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's a TV running or what. Any more? I'm pretty much we're gonna run this as far as we can. So, if you guys have any questions or any comments or anything?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
If do people believe that salt added to Senkos is actually works very, very well as a fish attractant? Do you think the salt in Senkos actually make a difference in when a bass bites that Senko, it tastes more realistic to him because of the added salt?
You know what? I don't think so. I really don't. I think the reason a Senko works so well is because that salt not only makes that, and now if we're talking about a Gary Yamamoto Senko,
yes, exactly.
They make their plastic out of vegetable oil. It's not plastisol like you have all the other ones out of. So it's a lot flimsier. It's also a lot more. It doesn't last that many fish. So it has a lot more wiggle as it's going down, and the massive amount of salt that they put in there causes it to sink better and sink faster when it has no weight on it. So I really think that it's more about the sink than anything. Now it might, I don't know.
Well, here, I'll give you a little background. Like
Yep.
I said, I make my own injection molded bait.
Right.
Gary Yamamoto and one other company, I think it was Zoom, years ago they used salt because they couldn't afford the plastisol back then before they went to vegetable oil. They actually used the salt to cheapen the cost of the worm.
Oh, okay.
And then they found out that because it was so heavily salted and the salt is heavy, it had a really interesting sink rate to it.
Mm-hmm.
An average Senko today weighs about 11 grams, 11.5, 11.2 grams.
Mm-hmm.
If you pick up a Bass Pro Sticko bait, a salt added bait, it's going to weigh about 8 grams. But I use something now called HD additive, and it's a silica, like sand, very, very fine sand. And now I add that to my Senkos. And the reason I do that is if you guys use Gary Yamamoto baits, you'll see that you catch 1 or 2 good bass, you can just throw the damn thing out. It's done.
It's done. Yeah.
But the way we are starting to make them, and I get this through Caney Creek or doitmolds.com. I don't mind telling you that.
Yeah.
I use something called HD additive now, and I can get my 11 gram of weight, but the durability of the worm is super enhanced, absolutely super enhanced. Frankly, I sell it to all my friends and I have customers who use it. And I'm not marketing. That's not my purpose. My purpose was strictly research to ask you guys if you really thought the salt was a fish attractant.
I have a question, kind of a two-part question about attractants. So, do you think that the JJ's Magic, I've seen you use it a lot, is it more of the garlic that attracts the fish, or is it the color? And someone asked, if you get I know the JJ's makes a clear, there's no color, could you dip crankbaits or lures into that and use it as an attractant?
I wouldn't put a crankbait into it. I've colored a crankbait with it using a Q-tip. I had a problem where I had a crankbait that was working really good because it had an orange belly on it, and I lost that crankbait. And I had another crankbait that was the same color, but the belly wasn't quite as orange. So I took a Q-tip and dipped it in the chartreuse and dipped it in the methylate, painted the belly, and then dipped it in chartreuse and painted the belly and made it orange. And stuff like that. And what my worry is if you dip the whole crankbait in there, that the base product that's made to break down the plastic in a soft plastic worm will do the same thing to the clear coat on your crankbait, and you'll lose your paint job is basically what you'll do. I worry about that, so I wouldn't go dipping your crankbaits in it, and I don't think scents make much of a difference on a crankbait anyway, because a crankbait is a reaction bait, And so that fish is going to see it coming, see it swimming to him, see it swimming by, and say, "Oh no, I got to get it," and goes and gets it, and does not pay attention to what it tastes like until he gets it in his mouth, and he's like, "Whoops." So, it's spinnerbaits. I love them on spinnerbaits because the spinnerbait skirts, you can make them all kinds of cool colors. You make the most beautiful fire tiger spinnerbait you ever seen in your life. With all 3 colors of JJ's Magic, the 3 original colors: blue, chartreuse, and methylate. Beautiful, beautiful skirts. And but crankbaits, I don't think it makes much of a difference at all. As for scents at all, I'm lucky enough to be really good friends with Bobby Urey, who's the owner of Mega Strike, and he makes that Mega Strike, attractant. And being that I'm a huge proponent of JJ's Magic, it's kind of a funny little friendship because they're kind of competitors. But he understands how a bass tastes, and a bass tastes. He says that a bass tastes at a molecular level. They don't really taste the larger particles of. They don't taste the oil-based stuff at all. you know, and stuff like that. So it's to me, it's more in my head. Attractants are more, you know. I've seen a difference between Spike It and I've seen it in JJ's, and I've seen JJ's make a difference to me. You know, and the story between me and JJ is I met him at a tackle shop one day, and we had a 2-hour conversation. And he just happens, his office, it just happens to be in the town I grew up in, and so I know the whole area, and I go visit him all the time now. But and he basically he gave me the bottles that I just bought online. He reimbursed my how much money I spent on the bottles. He said, you take it out, you test it, you try it. You know, because anything named, I told him, I said, anything with the name Magic in it puts up bells and whistles. You know, I don't believe you. I don't think it works because you're calling it a magic bait or a magic attractant. And so I took it out and I tested it. And I didn't pull it out for 2 months or a month and a half, I think, after I got it for free. I didn't just take it out the next day. I still had confidence in Spike It. But when I tested it and put it against Spike It, I basically found out that it caught bass better than Spike at 6-1. So, you know, it just kind of it was my own confidence bait, and that's what I tell everybody else. If you want to find out whether JJ's Magic works or not, go out and try it. You know, put it to the test, your own test. I don't believe that it's the end all. I mean, if you're on fish and they're biting, you're going to catch fish on it. I believe that if you're in a huge school of fish on a hump and you stop catching, if you dip that sucker in JJ's, I believe you'll catch 2 or 3 more fish out of that school. But I've fished it as the end all. I mean, as it was what they were biting, and they would not bite a worm unless it had JJ's on it. You know, and that's when I was drop shotting for spotted bass on Gunnersville with Bob Luss. A lot of people know him as the pond boss. I had him, and I had Carrie May, the wife of the owner of Bass Resource, in my boat. And JJ grabbed a worm, or I threw a worm back, or not JJ, I'm sorry. Bob, I threw a worm at him, and I watched him dip it in the bottle of Spike It I still had in my boat. And I watched him drop it down, and me and Carrie were still catching fish left and right, and he wasn't catching anything. And I turned around and I looked at him. I said, Bob, you want me to fix your worm for you? And he looked up at me kind of weird, and I said, yeah, I'll fix it. And he gave it to me, and I dipped it into JJ's, and he dropped it down and shook it twice and got bit. You know,
I'm definitely going to try it.
And
yeah, I remember reading that.
But you know what? And that was 2 weeks before I made the video of the 6 fish and 6 casts.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll be the first. I've never hidden this a day in my life. I was on that lake in North Carolina. It was the first day I'd ever fished that lake, and there were 200 to 300 hungry 14-inch bass on that point that I was throwing to. But had I not tested JJ's in 3 or 4 different occasions prior to that, I would have never made that video.
Well, I actually saw that video, and I saw that fog and stuff around. I thought there were ninjas on the outside of that fog hooking bass to your line just to prove them.
No, but and it was a private stocked lake, and I had never hidden the fact of that was the thing, you know. And then the next video I made, which was one where I made the 3 casts, 2 casts without JJ's, dipped it in clear, and then made the 3rd cast and caught a fish. That surprised me beyond belief. And that little fish choked that 10-inch worm in the gut before it hit the bottom, and before I got a chance to set the hook. And I didn't wait to set the hook. I mean, it was immediate. So, does it work? It does in my head. It does. You know, and for me to.
I'm going to try it, because I can tell you what you don't want to do is, and you can tell if you have human scent on your soft plastic baits, it's definitely a deterrent. It does turn off.
Yep.
Because they stick this. It's not a reactionary bite when you're using soft plastics. They put it in their mouth, and if it passes that test, then they're going to take a big rush of water and they're going to try to wash that thing down into their gullet. Yep. But if they grab that soft plastic and it's got an unusual foreign, like you said, smell or scent to it, they'll probably spit it out. I use ProScent. But I actually think at times ProScent turns off the fish. I'm really anxious to try JJ's clear garlic oil fish attractant.
Yeah,
go ahead. I was going to say, I always was told to spit on my.
I wouldn't do that. No.
But
I've never heard that one before.
and I really think that's what that's what it does. Is the biggest thing is it covers up your scent, and it makes. They did a study, and I want to say it was in the Bassmasters magazine back in the late '80s, early '90s. I was reading an old article years ago where they put 3 or 4 different scents out, and the one the bass seemed to be more attracted to was the garlic scent. And I'm pretty sure that's where JJ got the idea. Now, the other advantages to using JJ's Magic, and not just the scent, the fact that the colors penetrate your plastics more, and the scent penetrates your plastics more than Spike It. I'm comparing it to Spike It, okay? And so you get almost a complete penetration with the color, and that scent. If you dip it a worm in it, leave it on your rod, and go put it in the rack in your house, I guarantee your wife or your mother's going to fuss at you because you just smelled up her house with garlic. Because that garlic scent stays on that worm forever. I have a bag of white trick worms that I dyed bubblegum with that methylate color. I dyed them bubblegum 4.5 years ago, and they're still there, and they still smell like garlic. And I kind of hung them on a peg in the tackle shop in North Carolina and forgot about them. And I pulled them out. And
Clear do the same? Will the clear garlic do the same?
It's still got the same base chemical and it helps penetrate that scent down in there. So and the scent stays on for a long time. So and I agree with you there. I think it covers up the human scent, and I worry about the scents from sunscreen and stuff like that, and the oil and the gas from the boat and stuff like that getting on my baits. Another thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask a question then. I see a lot of fishing videos where the guys will rig up a bait, and I think I've seen you do it a couple of times where you will rig up a soft plastic and then they'll dip it in the water for a second. Is that trying to cover up their sin, or what is that? You know what I'm saying? I've seen them do that, and I thought at first I've seen a few people do it, and I was just like, I just didn't know what they were doing, but I've seen more and more people do it. They'll rig up a soft plastic, Texas rig it or Carolina rig it, and they'll dip it in the water for a couple of seconds, and then they'll cast it. And I'm like,
no, I think that's more habit than anything.
Okay.
I don't think there's a reason for it. With my JJs, I'll dip it in the chartreuse and let the last little drop fall off in the bottle, and then I'll throw it over into the water. Hopefully, I've tied it onto the line by then, but I throw it over into the water, and just to get it away from the boat so I don't put drips and drops of dye all over my boat and stuff like that. Another thing I noticed about JJ's is when you do spill it, it comes out faster than the Spike. It comes out of your carpet, whether it's I've got tan carpet in my boat, and the carpet's old and beat up and everything else, but I spilled a half a bottle of chartreuse in there, and in about 3 months it was gone. There was no sign of it anywhere.
I have friends who won't allow you to fish in their boat.
Oh, I believe it. I totally believe it.
It's like they won't allow you.
Yeah, we've got rules. Now, one thing about the things that people hate about JJ's. I didn't mean for this whole video to be about JJ's, but I love the stuff so much I'll talk about it. The thing that people complain the most about is that the pressure that's built up when that bottle gets hot. Okay, the base chemical develops pressure, and that's why it's in those glass bottles with those special lids, so it will release that pressure. Well, it's going to release that pressure no matter what. So if it's laying on its side, it's going to release that pressure, and the dye is going to come out with it. And so the biggest thing you do is how you store it in your boat. I keep it in a little Tupperware box about this big. I keep all 5 bottles in there with a little paper towel or a rag or something like that, and I keep it upright. It's a box that'll stay upright in the boat. And then when it gets really hot, in the 90s, I'll put it in my cooler. But I put it in my cooler where it stays upright, and it keeps it from gaining heat. It's that increase in temperature that causes it to pressurize. And you'll know it's too hot when you open it. First of all, every time you open JJ's, open it like a can of Coke that's been shaken. Open it real slow, just to let that pressure out, because it's going to have pressure. It may not have a whole lot, but when it's really hot, you dip your worm in there and it bubbles. It looks like it's boiling. It's
definitely
scary.
some good stuff to know.
Yeah, it's scary, but if you've got a little common sense, you won't spill it. The only time like I said, the only time I've ever spilled it is what I did is I put it down between my feet while I was dipping, and I didn't screw the lid back on. So I reached down to grab the bottle, and the lid came up, and the bottle fell. And that was stupid of me. But I've never spilt it opening it. You'll get a little bit on your fingers, and you'll smell like an Italian restaurant for the rest of the day. But that comes out, too, with a little soap and water. But, you know, it's just, do you want to catch more fish, or do you not, is my thing.
You should include those, like where you messed up like that and become this generation's Bill Dance. That's what you should really do.
I love Bill Dance too much to want to be like him.
Yeah, I grew up watching him. I was just like, yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things. You got to weigh the differences. If it's for you, use it. If it's not for you, don't use it. If it scares you because you think it's going to explode, I hate that word because it never explodes. Don't use it. I'm okay with it. You know, and I'm pretty sure JJ is too. He wants everybody to use it because he wants to put shoes on his grandkids. But you know, JJ, if you've never met him, he's got a few videos out that I videoed for him and put on his YouTube channel. But he's an old retired cop, a downtown Atlanta cop. He's a great guy, one of the nicest men you'll ever meet in your life, and very appreciative of all the help he ever gets. But you know, he's just a downright down-home Southern redneck is all he is. Just a great guy. He loves everybody. So, you know,
where do you get it at? Where do you find JJ's magic?
Tackle Warehouse carries it and sells the snot out of it. If you have a local shop that would, you know, like a mom and pop shop that can order from distributors, then Pittman Creek Outfitters or Pittman Creek Wholesale, I think is what it's called, carries it, and they should have your local shop should have a catalog for Pittman Creek, and they'll sell it. So you can get them to carry it, and they don't have to order a whole lot of bottles from Pittman Creek.
You can order straight from the website too.
Yeah,
right?
Straight from JJ's website too. Yep. Yeah, and
I think I'm gonna have to give some of this stuff a try.
It's some good stuff. It really is. I mean,
I've never really messed around with scents or anything before.
Yeah. If you get some you can either go ahead and order. If you order it from JJ's website, he doesn't charge extra like a lot of other websites do. You know, more than what everybody else does. But I like to tell you to just order what I call the Pro Pack, which is all the colors. But if you only want to buy a couple of bottles, get chartreuse and get clear. And then if you like it, you can go on and get the other colors. One of these days, I'm going to take what I call my cookbook, my JJ's cookbook, and I'm going to do a video of how I color my different baits. I can make an albino fluke look just like a sexy shad crankbait. You know, blue on top, chartreuse on the side with a Q-tip, and and the different colors of crankbait. I can turn a pearl fluke to make it look like a yellow perch, the most beautiful fire tiger that you've ever seen. You know, it's just how you color it and how you dye it, and what the basic or what the original color was. You know, you can make with the methylate on green pumpkin or watermelon. You can make the perfect orange that you see on crawfish. You know, those you see, yeah. And the methylate, if you dip it in white, it's pink. But if you dip a green pumpkin or a watermelon in there, it turns it orange. And I know a lot of guys that use it. Aaron Martin swears by JJ's Magic, and he has said it in public. You just have to find the right videos where he says it, because he's not sponsored by them. JJ doesn't have enough money to sponsor Elite Pros. He doesn't make enough. But you know, Aaron Martin's uses, and I know the two Lane brothers use it, Chris and Bobby, and I could name off a bunch more. I've had Mike McClellan came whispering in my ear about 3 years ago. Hey, you know that JJ stuff? I got some in my boat. So you know, I know some of these guys are using it, but you know, yeah, they like it, but I want you guys to try it and see whether you like it. So.
Now they got one of the colors that she showed was like a blood red color.
Yep.
That they have now. I thought red you couldn't see. Fish didn't see that underwater.
It depends on water clarity. They'll see it. Okay. It's the first color in the spectrum to disappear or to gray out. I'm not going to say disappear because it doesn't disappear, but it's the first color to gray out as you're going deep. And it all depends on how much light penetration you have. So it could be 5 feet, it could be 10 feet. It all depends. So.
Well, in clear conditions, it's still red. You can still see red in clear conditions 8, 9 feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
It begins to. You're absolutely right. It's the first color to go, and the last colors to go are green and blue.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, here the water's muddy.
Yeah, so it's.
Oh, when water's muddy, then you got to use black or blue. You got to go dark when it's dark. It's that simple.
Yep. Yeah,
And
you
it
go.
makes a difference.
Yeah, if my rule of thumb is if I'm fishing muddy or heavily stained water, if I hold the bait up and if I can see the light through the bait, I'm not going to use it. I like the baits that actually put off a what's the word I'm thinking of? A silhouette. So yeah, dark colors, blacks and blues. You know, green pumpkin if there's not a whole lot of mud in it. But if I'm fishing muddy water, it's going to be a black and blue jig with rattles. You know?
Yeah, that's always confused me because people were talking about the jitterbug, and these guys up here were talking about they do rodeos here at night, and they said, oh yeah, use a black jitterbug, and I'm like, why black in the middle of the night? You know, the fish ain't going to see that, but yeah, it makes sense now.
Yeah, silhouette up against the sky is exactly what it is. They can see it. You know, I use black worms and June bug worms when I'm night fishing.
Yep.
You know, and I'm dragging a Carolina rig. You know, I'm a believer that I'll use the same thing during the day that I will at night. Just change the colors up. So, but
I use a lot of flake. I found that if I'm in stained or muddy water and I'm fishing early in the morning or later in the evening, I put a lot of flake in my bait. A lot of gold, a lot of chartreuse flake, a lot of red flake, anything that has a potential of reflecting some type of light, what little light there might be.
Yeah.
It's enough for them to quickly turn and look at it.
Yeah.
Here's a crazy question.
Yeah.
I don't make any, but does anybody tube fish anymore? Do you know if the pros even tube fish anymore?
I know Denny Brower loves to tube fish, but he'll Texas rig it with a bullet weight. Because I've seen him do it. But I off the top of my head, I know a lot of people do. You know, it's a great bait because of the way it falls and spirals down and stuff like that when you're fishing deep. I personally don't like it because if I'm rigging it traditionally with the tube jig and everything else, I can't feel the bottom. And if I'm fishing the bottom, I want to know what I'm fishing on. You know, and it always feels like it always feels like I'm fishing a silty bottom, even though I'm fishing rock. And I just don't like the feel of them, so I fished one for 12 hours straight one day. Caught fish on it, but still at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I've got no confidence in this bait. And so maybe if I fished it like Denny Brower and Texas rigged it with a bullet weight, I'd fish it. You know.
Texas rig with the bait with the bullet inside of it. Is that what he's doing?
No. A traditional with a bullet free on the line.
If you're fishing in a silty structure or anything like that, do you do anything different? Like what's
bass tend to like hard bottoms.
Okay.
You know, or hard structure. If there's a lot of silt on the bottom and there's no hard bottom, they're going to go locate a rock or a log or a stump, and they're going to tend to be closer to that. And they don't want to get down in there because as they're breathing, they're sucking in that stuff and breathing it through their gills. But
silty structure or anything like that?
Hold on. Yeah, there we go. I had to fix that. There's always a lag when somebody first comes in on the Hangout, so I have to mute them for just a little while. So Rob, you're muted just for a few seconds until your computer catches up. But and what I change is I just don't fish something that's going to sit on the bottom much. If I feel like I'm fishing silty bottoms and there's fish there, you know, if I'm fishing an area that I know has fish, and I'm going to go look for that hard bottom with my bait.
Okay. So, now, do you fish something like weightless? Like I don't even like to fish them, but like a weightless Cinco, if it's like shallow but still has silt on the bottom and you know they're there.
Yep. Something that fishes slow. Yeah,
right.
Or that sinks slow. That's always an option. Something that moves like a crankbait, and not, you know, you can still kick up the silt on the bottom if it's bouncing up quite a bit. I don't know. You know, like I said, I avoid it. If I find that silty bottom, I try to avoid it. There are a lot of people in a lot of lakes that you just can't avoid.
There's only a little bit of area that has actual like little rock patches and stuff, and that's where the fish are most of the time. But I've been getting away with it with a drop shot, so.
Yep, drop shot, keeping that bait up out of that silt, just like you would grass.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You know, and when you're drop shotting, and I know I mentioned this a few videos ago, but you know, the choice of sinker that you use really makes a difference. If you use those long, skinny sinkers, When you're fishing silt, a lot of them will wobble up and down as you're wiggling your worm.
These are teardrop one.
Yeah, the long ones will kick up that silt and attract the fish down there instead of at your bait. So yeah, use a teardrop or a round one for that silty stuff. But when you're fishing cover and rocks and things like that, you want to use one of those elongated ones, because it doesn't get hung up as much. So yeah. Crazy all the details about bass fishing, isn't it? So, I keep looking over here at questions over here on the live stream. People are not really asking questions; they're more making statements. But and it's hard to read the questions and listen to you guys at the same time. Let's see. I got 20 more minutes. I want to run this to 11 o'clock. So, unless nobody wants to talk anymore,
I kind of got a random question.
All right, random way.
Way backtracking on a drag. So I hooked up to probably what I thought was a 4-pound bass, and it was running. It was pulling drag, but like enough that I kept the tension up on my rod, but it threw the hook, and I believe that's because the drag was too loose, maybe. But I felt because I was keeping tension, it wouldn't really.
Well, it really matters. What were you fishing with? What bait?
It was a spinning rod with a Texas rigged like Havoc. I think it was a Havoc Pit Boss.
Okay, and what do you remember what size hooker you were using?
4-aught.
So it was about a 4-aught, like probably a Gamma God. So it really doesn't matter because they're all about made the same.
Offset. Yeah.
Okay, and you're using a spin rod.
Yep.
Was it a medium or medium heavy action?
Medium.
Medium. You probably never got the hook penetrated in. Because first of all, Havoc baits plastics are pretty tough. They're durable. I love them because they last forever. But it takes a little bit more pressure force to get that hook through that thicker plastic.
Because when I set the hook, drag came out. So I don't know if that prevented me from getting the hook set.
You want a little bit of that drag to come out, or you'll break your line off.
Yeah.
If your drag catches during that period of time, you're liable to break your line. Yeah. But it's how freely did that drag come off?
Yeah.
And so you got to kind of say, oh, whoops, and tighten that down and set the hook again.
Yep.
Or, it may have been just because you didn't have enough backbone on that rod for that hook and that bait. It may have been the biggest problem.
Yeah.
So many things can go wrong on the hook set. So many things. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out where you screwed up and what you got to do to fix it. And a lot of times, what I'll do is if I feel like my last fish I lost because of that, I'll do double hook sets. I'll hook set it, I'll hook set it again to see if I can get him in.
Yeah.
But usually by then I've already switched rods. But there are periods of times where I'm too lazy to switch the rod and I just double hook set. So.
You know what you ought to consider maybe one day doing a video on how to sharpen your hooks. I sharpen my hooks all day long with a little. It's a little pencil type of sharpener.
Yep.
You put it in a groove, and then you pull it away from you.
Yep.
And even the Pro Cars and the Gamakatsus, if you hit something hard, some type of obstruction, you can still bend the point of the hook. And you'd be surprised how many people are fishing with really dull hooks. I mean, and then I drag them across my skin. If they actually begin to penetrate my skin at the slightest movement, then I'm good.
Yeah, Glenn, the Gamakatsus are famous for the tip bending. Just the very tip of your hook will bend over and it'll become dull. Glenn May, the owner of Bass Resource, just made a very, very good video on sharpening a hook, and you can find it on Bass Resource in their video library. But you know what? I might do one, or have him send me that video and put it on my channel, because he's the best I know at sharpening hooks. I don't sharpen hooks. If I've got enough of them because I bought some in bulk years ago, that if I've got a bad one, I chunk it in the trash and tie another one on, because I'm just wanting to use all of those up so I can go buy the better brands that are out there now. But anyway, yeah, you got a good point though. It's I need to have one for sharpening and how the different ways of sharpening hooks. He uses actually there's a company, and I don't know what company it is, but there's a regular flat sharpener that has a groove in it just for hooks. and I don't know what it is. I know the pen sharpener you use, but and he sits there and he makes his incredibly sharp. Yeah, that one right there, and that little groove right there with that diamond sharpener. Hold on, let me let you pop up. Let me undo mine. Yeah, that one right there is a dang good sharpener. And who makes that one, Tom?
Let me see if it's got a name on it. Oh, this is definitely Bass Pro.
Okay.
I use this all the time, and then Berkeley, I think it's Berkeley, makes one that looks like a pencil. You stick it in your pocket.
Yeah, little rod sharpener.
And that sharpens them just as sharp as you want. But this, if you know, some people are not that agile with their fingers, so this is a one that you can really grip onto, and the way you do it is when you put the hook, you put the point down in that groove, and you always go into the point. Don't go backwards into it. Always go away, drag the point right through that groove, and do that 2 or 3 times. And then what I do is then I'll turn it a little sideways, do it again, do it again, do it again, turn it the other way, and try to get 3 different angles on it.
Yep.
And you can get a hook so damn sharp that it'll cut the air. But it makes a difference in the hook set. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
With 3 angles.
And it's a great thing to have if you don't have a whole lot of money to buy a whole lot of hooks. You know, it's just I got lucky. There was a hook company going out of business that already sold them dirt cheap, but then sold them really, really cheap. And the company, the people he was buying his hooks from were the same ones that are making Gamakatsu hooks. So I basically got an off-brand and a boatload of hooks that I've got to use up, and they're wide gaps. And everybody knows I don't like using wide gaps anymore, but I'm using them because I've got them, and I'm going to use them all up because I'm cheap.
Now, talking about videos, when are you going to upload your Peacock Bass video?
Yeah. It is already uploaded. I am waiting for Peter Miller to finish. He's doing some stuff to his channel, and we're gonna. He did one, and I did one. Excuse me. And we're gonna launch them at the same time.
Okay.
Because mine promotes his promotes mine. It's cross promotion.
Okay.
But it's probably going to be, from what they say, it's going to be about another week, maybe a week and a half. So the cool thing is that the network that I just signed up with about 3 months ago, they've got a lady on there that is a guru of YouTube. She's helping me so much right now, and she's giving me a whole lot of projects and a lot more work to do than I really want. But she is. I gave her access to my channel, so she's actually. I think she's going to do the launching. So I don't even have to worry about it anymore. She'll set it up to launch when Peter's is going to launch and everything else. But it's an awesome video. I actually got to put music to it, which I don't do very often. So.
I wondered why you had all the pink and purple decor on your YouTube side.
Nah, she wouldn't do that to me. Actually, the cool thing she did is she got I think it's called a vanity URL or something like that. But now you can type in instead of FLUKEMSTR on my URL, you can do all Flute Master and it pops up. So she finally got me that name or that URL from YouTube, which they wouldn't let me have 5 years ago when I signed up. So she's awesome. She's absolutely awesome. I'm so glad she did that. But anyway, it's and I think networks for YouTube channels and stuff like that. I think that's the way of the future, where they pool all these YouTube channels together and they use them to bring in better advertisers and help us to make our channels a lot better. So I'm learning a ton from it. If you go to my main page, you'll notice that I've got some a new banner up that has wording and graphics and stuff in it, because that's what she made me do. That was my project 2 days ago.
Yes.
So.
Do you actually have a website?
Nope, I don't. Not yet. It keeps popping in, and people keep saying, "Oh, you need to get a website." When I see the need for it, I'll get it. I kind of want a website when I start guiding full time. Right now, I'm guiding just whenever I can, and it's not really an official business or anything else. But when I start guiding full time, I can get people to that website so they can see what I charge and things like that. But,
what lakes do you guide on?
I guide wherever you want me to go. Mainly because I teach. I don't really. It's not a let's go load the boat trip. It's I'm going to teach you how to find fish on your lake, or whatever lake you want me to meet on. I charge for it. It ain't cheap because I got to charge for gas and lodging, and I stay at campsites in a hammock.
Right.
I got to charge for my my cost and my time. So
what if I let you sleep on my couch?
Fly to California.
Yeah, but and the furthest away I've guided was Lake Wheeler in Alabama, or no, Wilson in Alabama. I guided one day on Wilson.
So if we're ever passing through your area,
Mhm.
can we stop in and say hi and just say how you doing?
Yeah, you'd have to find me on the lake probably.
Did you get your seats in your boat fixed too?
They are. I've got to call. I was going to call him today. I got to call the guy and tell him that I got my boat back and he can start on my seats again because he has all the stuff. He just needs to put it all together. So I'll get my seats fixed and hopefully he does upholstery for all the high end furniture places around. So I think it'll look pretty. I just hope it doesn't have lace on it. So. And he's a friend of mine, and I've been ragging him about a couple of things recently, so he might mess around with my seats. But yeah, I'll guide, and I like taking people fishing, and like I said, it's not an official thing, and I do it when I can, but I'm just waiting for that point in time in my life where I can say, I can move into that point. I really love my job. I love shooting X-rays. I love working in the trauma center, and I love doing that. But there may come a point in time in my life where I can do this full time and still not put my family in the poorhouse, because my wife's about to go from being a nurse in the pediatric emergency room to being a school nurse. So we're taking a cut and pay that way, but it's her dream job, and that's what she's always wanted to do. So, and it'll also open up 5 days a week for me to fish. So I'm not complaining.
I'm going to private message you with my email address. So if you're down in the Orlando area, I'll be happy to take you out.
Oh shoot! Yeah, I wish I'd have known that a few weeks ago. I'd have planned an extra day down there.
Yeah, really, because I'm semi-retired. I do a lot of fishing. Well, I fish a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
If you're ever up in East Tennessee, I'll be happy to take you out, but you'll have to sit on the back of the kayak. Right?
Well, I kayak fish too. That's how I
love it.
I have a Key West Stealth. I have a flatboat that I bass fish out of, and it's 10 times better than fishing with a bass boat. I love my Key West Stealth. But when I do saltwater fish, and I don't do it that often, I fish the Mosquito Lagoon. I fish out of a ocean kayak. Because I can, you need to get into really, really, really skinny water in the morning. So there's, I go into what's called like tiger shoals in my kayak, and literally 6 inches of water and watch them tail and laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I love to travel. I'm going to North Carolina here in a few weeks to take some guy out, and I've never been on any of the lakes he's talking to, but I really enjoy. I'll get there the day before, and I'll go, and mainly just for a safety check, run around the lake to see what hazards there are, what to look for, and things like that, and then try to find some fish. But I love to take people out and show them how I attack a lake that I've never seen before or that I don't know anything about. The first time I ever did that was on Lake Eufaula. And I'm so proud of myself. I mean, I'll toot my horn all day long. I caught a 4.5 pound on the third cast of the day. I caught a 4.5 pound bass in 20 feet of water on a rock pile.
Wow.
On a jig. And I had never been on Eufaula again in my life. But the only reason was I was dodging a thunderstorm, and I went down the lake and cut into a creek and was trying to dodge this storm. And as I was about to go under a bridge, I looked down and saw this line of rocks coming off the bank out deep. And I said, "There's got to be a fish in those rocks." And I turned around and got a bit on the third cast or second cast and caught him on the fourth cast. So it was just, I'm proud of myself. In my mind, I'm not a great angler. I'm still learning, and I always want to stay that way because I want to continue to. I don't ever want to think that I'm the best in the world, or ever want to think that I know everything, because that's when you stop learning. So that's just me.
Well, see, I get upset because I watched your videos. I was like, yeah, I want to get the bass fishing, and you're like drop shot. You're like, check this drop shot out. And you threw it in, and you were like, okay, wiggle a little bit, and then you were reeling in a bass, and I was like, that's easy. I can do that. I drop shot from the bank. I'm like, wiggle it a little bit, cuss, and throw your rod down and stomp away mad. I'm like, how does he do it?
Well, Chris, biggest thing is pick something, just one thing, and learn it. You know, that's where I got the name Fluke Master from. Is that when I first started bass fishing, getting serious about bass fishing. I started bass fishing when I was a teenager, but when I got serious about it when I was just after I got married, I started getting into these forums and stuff, and I had to come up with a screen name. Well, at that time, I was trying to master one bait, and that was the Fluke. Not the Super Fluke, not the Super Fluke Junior, but the Fluke that doesn't have a little split in it. And I said, okay, this is going to be my motivation. I'm going to name myself Fluke Master. And that was my motivation to do it. And I picked one bait. I fished only that bait for months. And so my suggestion would be pick a rig and pick a bait and go out and fish it and fish it and fish it and learn the little nuances of it and learn what it can and can't do. And you'll catch fish on it, you know. And if people ask me what bait should that be, I really think you ought to learn a Mojo rig, to be honest with you.
I learned that rig from your videos, and it's awesome.
And because it's a light line, it's a finesse technique, but it's a Carolina rig is basically what it is. And you can use a bullet weight, a 16th ounce bullet weight, but I use little cylindrical weights because I can make them and I have them. But any little light weight will work, and it's perfect for grass. It comes through all kinds of cover, and it catches fish. And you use small worms or trick worms, you know, stuff like that with it. And I caught my personal best with it. You know, 8-pound test fluorocarbon out of the grass, and it was a 9.98 fish. You know.
Wow.
And it was in a tournament, so it won me a little money. But you know, it's just a matter of, it's a great bait for small ponds, big ponds, anything else, and it teaches you to feel what you're dragging through, and it gets bit. So
yeah, I hear you talk about ponds. It's like I read places like if you're getting into bass fishing, and if everybody in here's wondering, I ask so many stupid questions. It's because I just started into getting into bass fishing.
He's never caught a bass before.
Never caught a bass in my entire life. I've caught a bluegill that weighed about probably half an ounce, but hey, you know, I'm not bragging here, guys. Don't worry. You know, I hear people say, start out on ponds and catch bass, smallmouth, bass, whatever, and then move up to doing lakes. And there's really you know, I found a few ponds, and you know, I'm an amputee, so it's hard for me to get to places.
Yeah.
So I found a few TWRA regulated, Cherokee Forest National Forest regulated fishing ponds, but you know, I've went to these places and I've cast and I've followed your videos and looked.
Yeah.
Places to fish, but it's like I never catch anything, and it's like I'm always like, am I using the right? You know, I'll fish, like I say, I'll fish a Carolina rig for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, nothing. I'll put on a crankbait, nothing. I'll do a Texas rig, nothing. So I'm not catching anything, and I do move from spot to spot, but I just don't know. I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
Well, if I had to suggest one thing, is fish 2 different speeds, very, very, very fast or very, very, very slow. And if you do either one of those, and that's why I like a Mojo rig, because it's made to fish slow. It's a 16th ounce weight, and to keep it down on the bottom, you got to fish it slow. But if you do either one of those things, you'll catch some fish. You know, very, very fast is good because you're covering a lot of water, and you're going to find that one fish that can catch up to your bait, and you'll catch it. I'm not going to say you're going to load the boat with them, but you'll catch fish with them. But you know, if I had a suggestion for you though, Chris, since you're fishing those bigger lakes, is concentrate on shady areas, wherever the bass can find shade, whether it's a tree laying in the water or grass or something you can see because you don't have a depth finder. There's always going to be shallow fish, whether it's summertime or wintertime. There's always going to be shallow fish. There's just not going to be very many of them in the deep dead of the summer or the dead of the winter. So go find those shady spots. If you got green grass, fish as much of that green grass that's in the water as you can. Eventually you're going to catch a fish. But stick to one bait, learn what it feels like, so when you do get that bite, you know that it's not a grass, and you know it's not, you know, a rock or a log or whatever else. You know it's a bite. You know, and one of the worst things I ever hear people say, and I'm guilty of it too, is when in doubt, set the hook. My idea when you're trying to learn how to catch a fish and learn what a bite is when in doubt, hold your rod still at 10 o'clock and reel your line up till it starts to get tight, and just hold it there still. And if your line moves and you didn't move it, then it's a fish. You see what I'm saying? You'll feel that bite. You'll feel that fish pulling back against you. And so, that's the biggest thing is yeah, when you get to the point where you're really good at fishing and you don't feel your bait anymore. I know there's a couple videos, including the peacock bass one that you're going to see, where I say I don't feel the bait anymore, and then I set the hook, and there's a fish on, because I don't feel the bait, and so I was in doubt that that I wasn't feeling anything anymore, and I set the hook. But that comes with experience. But you need to learn as a beginner who's never caught a fish. You need to learn what a bite feels like, and learn what everything else feels like. So when it doesn't feel like anything else, it's the bite. So
I know what rocks and trees feel like. I catch those all the time.
I was waiting for that. I knew as soon as I stopped talking, you were going to say that too. I love it.
Maybe what he could think about doing is also maybe using a spinner bait. If you use a crankbait and you throw it around structure and you're a beginner, that crankbait won't last long.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're going to lose it. But you'd be surprised how you can throw a spinner bait and give it a moderate retrieve, and that thing will go through almost anything.
Yeah.
And spinner baits are a great way to really to kind of broadcast cast. It's just a good way to cover a lot of territory.
Yeah, yeah.
And
you're right.
They work everywhere and all year long.
Yeah, and they don't get hung up very much either. And go with the smaller ones right now, since you've got that. You're going to be using a spinning rod probably and stuff like that. Don't get some of those big old half-ounce ones. Get the little small quarter-ounce spinner baits and go out and throw them. Anything, any color that's white or chartreuse or both.
What about rooster tails? Are those?
Oh yeah, they're phenomenal. I mean, they're I've got a video about inline spinners, and they're my go-to when the bass are schooling on teeny tiny little bait fish in late summer, and I can't catch them on anything else. Is I'll throw a little rooster tail out because they mimic a really small bait fish. That's a perfect, little kid, beginning bass fisherman, beginning fisherman, because they catch everything. They'll catch bluegill, they'll catch bass, they'll catch all kinds of stuff. They just make sure you put a swivel up your line a little bit from it. Either it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches, because they will cause line twist like crazy.
Okay.
So any kind of those inline spinners, put a swivel on there. A lot of people will put one of those little snap swivels on, which is fine. I just think they add too much to the bait. You're trying to mimic a small bait. So. I think it's awesome that you want to catch fish, dude. I mean, it's cool to have you on here that you've never caught one.
Yeah, never caught one. So
we can talk about those beginning things that a lot of us always have forgotten about. So I remember my first bass on a spinnerbait. It was in a public fishing area that they had just refilled the water and everything else and had new structure in. And I was bringing it over some floating logs that were cable tied down to the bottom of the lake, but they were floating up at the surface. And I had a 5-pounder come out and grab hold of my spinnerbait out of a hole and take it right back down in. And I remember this because I remember I was using Power Pro braid on my spinnerbait. And it was like the first or second year Power Pro had ever been out. Was it Power Pro? No. It was a spider wire braid.
Oh God, that's
the original spider wire that you had to put super glue on the knots to keep the knots from pulling out.
That stuff was horrible.
It was. I ended up losing that spinnerbait later on because the knot pulled out. But I caught that 5-pounder, and that was the fish that hooked me on bass fishing. And so spinnerbaits are great because they don't get hung up. You can bring them over logs, you bring them through grass and stuff like that. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'll give you a little hint. I called up Loctite, the company that makes Crazy Glue, the gel. It's called CKTITE.
Yeah.
I actually spoke to a female chemist there and found out that if you're having problems with your knots, you can use that on your monofilament line, and it does not deteriorate it.
Oh, really?
He claimed that it was perfectly legitimate to do.
Huh.
So if someone has issues about their knots coming apart, I actually, there's times when I still put it on my knots for God knows what. Well, I also use it when I put like a Senko or a trick worm on.
Yeah.
I'll put a little drop of super glue on the shank of the hook where it goes into the top of the bait of the worm, just so it doesn't keep sliding down. But according to this woman, she said there was no reason why that would cause damage to a fishing line.
Huh. Yeah, so I guess it wouldn't break down the plastic would be the only reason why it would, it would cause damage. That's cool. I always try to keep that gel super glue in there somewhere in my box somewhere because a lot of times you need to either put a bait bat together that's working really good, or make sure it stays on your hook.
There's a good product out there. I think it's called Pro Soft Bait Glue.
Yeah.
That's a really good. It was Bill Siementel that he's the one that's kind of advertising it. That was really good glue.
I've seen lure retrievers, you know, like the weighted things that you put online. Do those really work? Are those worth it? Okay. I saw a guy use a homemade one. He took a spark plug and put a swivel on it and used it.
Yep.
Because I'm always getting caught in something.
But it's difficult to do from the bank because you have to get over top of the bait or just past the bait to knock it free if it's a crankbait. And every single stinking time I try to do a video on it, something happens where I can't. And the last time I was going to do one when I was on Wilson Lake, and just before I was going to do it, I lost my lure retriever on the bottom of the lake. I got my bait stuck, and it must have been stuck on something metal, so because I dropped it down, and that 80-pound braid I had on my lure retriever cut like butter, and I lost my $25 lure retriever down the bottom of the lake. So I'm going to end up doing one day. I've got to order a new one, but anyway, I use other things they're called pocket knockers, and I know there's a company that makes them. That's what they're called, but that's what I call this. Is I take a really big bell sinker and I put a clip on it. What do they call it? Anyway, it's the clip that's on the swivel clips. Mm-hmm. I put one of those on there. And then when I get a crankbait hung, I'll pull it out of my pocket, clip it on my line, pull my line tight, drop it all the way down till it hits the bait, and then drop my line really quick. And a lot of times, just this change in the weight drops it down and knocks my crankbait loose. So, but there's been a few times where I've left my pocket knocker and crankbait down wherever it got hung. So, and it's just they're worth their weight in gold, I tell you. They'll pay for themselves, in 2 crankbaits now, 3 crankbaits. You can buy one at Bass Pro Shops for like $12. But I'll do a video about it one day. Just been one of those things. It's been my nemesis.
I'd like to. I see your bank fishing video. I'd like to see more of those where you did it with that guy.
Yeah, with Ryan.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. I used that a lot. Like the backpack, I used to just carry a tackle box, but then I went out and bought a backpack and everything, and found that to be more. It was easier from what he said, from everything he said. So
okay, this is what I want you guys to do. I want you to get on Facebook and look up Ryan, RYAN LAMB, and I want you to bomb him with requests to start making bank fishing videos on YouTube.
I didn't spell his last name.
What's his last name?
Lamb, just like the LAMB.
Okay.
And just bombard him, and he's gonna get so mad at me. But he is the bank fishing guru in my book, and he I'll tell you, and I love to talk about him because I've fished with him since he was 13 years old, and his dad's not, due to circumstances, his dad's not in the picture, and so I got a chance to kind of help him learn, and a bunch of other anglers got to help him learn how to bass fish, or make him better at bass fishing. But he is such a skilled angler. When he was fishing the Junior Bass Masters, he got disqualified from the first tournament because his paperwork was all messed up. Something about his health, his release form, and everything else wasn't right. So he got disqualified from that tournament. Well, he proceeded to win every tournament after that, including 2 bank fishing tournaments. One of them where he caught like a 9-pound bass bank fishing. But he proceeded to beat the snot out of all the rest of the guys in the Junior Bassmaster Club, all the way up to the last tournament. And this was a Georgia Junior Bassmasters team that was the best in the country at the time. And so this dude was amazing. I loved watching him. I was the boater for 2 of those tournaments, so I got to watch him go out and catch fish in 98-degree surface temperature, catch them on a jig and just wax everybody. And so he's a talented angler, and he's so good on video. I wish he would just go and make these videos. But real quick, guys, before you guys can stay on here, I'm going to end this video because it's 11 o'clock. But I'm going to stay on. You guys can stay on. We can talk for a little bit longer. Let me go ahead and give my final spiel so I can edit it out next week. Let's see. Well, guys, I hope you learned everything you needed to learn about rods and lures and what lures go with the rods. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. And like I always say, visit bassresource.com for the answer to all your questions about bass fishing. And have a great day. And then I stop.